In this guide video, we're going to use the temperature and relative humidity sensor. Just before we start, a quick note. Don't get the sensor wet. The sensor is the part that's red at the end, and in the picture here it's on the right hand side. It's only designed to measure the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, not underwater or with water on it. If you do get it wet, you need to dry it out quickly. You won't get very good readings and you may damage the sensor. So be careful not to get the sensor wet. Now the temperature and relative humidity sensor is this guy right here, and he connects onto the JackBord via an I2C port, which on the JackBord is near port D at the bottom, and we'll learn about that later on. But basically this little red unit here, this is what measures the temperature and humidity. So before we start, the first thing we need to know is, what is temperature? So basically temperature is defined as a measure of the hotness or coldness of an object, and that's related to the amount of kinetic activity or energy in the object. So a red hot poker has a lot more energy than a cold poker. And it's measured in arbitrary scales, like degrees Celsius. So these are scales that human beings have invented for their own use. So for example, you've got degrees Celsius, you've got Kelvin, you've got Fahrenheit. Now lastly, absolute zero is 0 degrees Kelvin, or minus 273.15 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, you cannot go any lower. The laws of physics will not let you get any colder. So in the coldest, most remote, isolated piece of the universe would be at about 0 degrees Kelvin. The next one is relative humidity. So relative humidity is a measure of the amount of moisture in the atmosphere right now, at the time you're making the measurement, relative to the maximum amount that it's capable of holding. So if the relative humidity is very low, it means that the atmosphere could still hold a lot more moisture without condensation, so without it condensing onto surfaces. But if the humidity or the relative humidity is getting up to 100%, that means that the atmosphere is saturated. So if you think of a sponge, when the sponge is completely soaked, that is 100% relative humidity. And if you try and add any more water to it, it's going to start dripping out. So anything below 100% humidity is the sponge totally soaked, but not dripping. Okay? So next, we're going to set up the sensor. Okay, so what you're going to need, first of all, is a JackBord. Secondly, you're going to need 4 short female-to-female jumper wires, 1 M4 nut, 1 M4 bolt, some kind of spanner with which to do the nut, and finally the temperature and humidity sensor. Okay, putting it together is pretty easy. As usual, the first thing we're going to do is bolt the sensor on, but note that this time around we're putting it on the bottom of the JackBord near port D, not at port B where we have in the past. Let's get our nut. So this is just basically for convenience to make it easier to work with. Doesn't need to be in very tight, so that's the sensor mounted. So if you look at the sensor, we've got a green set of pins, yellow set of pins. So the green one is ground, the yellow one is 3 volts, sorry. So we're going to take the green jumper wire and just go to the ground. Then we'll take the yellow jumper wire and go from the 3 volts on the JackBord, which is here, to the yellow pins on the sensor. The next one we want to do is the I2C line. So you've got 2 here. You've got a white set of pins and a blue set of pins. So the white ones are the data, and they go into pin D5. Okay? And then the blue one is the clock. And that goes into the blue pin, and it goes into pin D4. So we have 4 wires going from the sensor into the JackBord. Now the thing is, and I'll cover this very briefly, unlike the previous sensors we've looked at, this one uses a digital link. And the digital signals are carried by the white and the blue wires. The blue wire is a clock signal which lets everything keep in sync, and then the white wire carries the data. So once you've connected the sensor, it should look something like this. Here are some close-up images showing the wiring. So the left-hand image shows the connections to the sensor itself, and the right-hand picture shows the connection of the wires into port D on the JackBord. Compare them with yours and make sure that they match. It doesn't matter if you haven't got the exact same colors, as long as they go to the right places. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, after you've checked the wiring, is to turn on the JackBord. Right, now that we've got the sensor connected and the JackBord's turned on, go to the command page, and we're going to use these two commands to get readings from the sensor. The first one is the F2C command, and what that does is it tells the JackBord to go out and find any sensors that are connected to its I2C bus. So at the command prompt, just type F2C and press enter. And the JackBord is going to tell us that the brain is turned on, and here we go. So it's found the air temperature sensor on channel 37, and it has found the relative humidity sensor on channel 38. Now the next command that we're going to use, since we've found the sensors, is the GT command, and what that stands for is basically get. So type GT at the command prompt and press enter, and the JackBord will get the readings from all the different sensors. And down here, see on channel 37 we have the air temperature, which is 24.65 degrees Celsius, and then on channel 38 we have the relative humidity, which is on 54.40. Now when I say channels, you can think of them as being like channels on a television set. You've got TV1, TV2, TV3, etc. This is more or less the same thing. Channel 37 is the air temperature. Channel 38 is the relative humidity. Now what we can do is, using the up arrow on the keyboard, we bring back the GT command and run it again, and we can see the temperature is pretty consistent. So if I now grab the sensor and then run the GT command again and get some more readings, we can see that it's gone up. So it was 24.65, now it's 28.89. Now let's look at the humidity. So right now the humidity is 56.42. So if I just breathe on the sensor and get a reading, you can see that the humidity is immediately jumped up to 100%. And of course the reason for that is that our breath is full of moisture, and that comes from our lungs. So the sensor is working really well. So we've got temperature and humidity. Another thing you can do with the sensor is go to the live page. So if you click on the live page link, which is on the top left side here underneath the command link, it will take you to the live page. Now if I grab the sensor, you can immediately see that the values change. So we've got channel 38 up the top. If you click on a row, it shows you a graph. So this is channel 38, which we know is humidity. So if I grab it, it changes. And likewise, channel 37 is the temperature. So if I grab that, that should also change. Different. Yeah, there we go, 31. Sometimes it takes a while. And also, if the sensor is at room temperature and your body's at room temperature, you grab it and there'll be no change. So this is another way that you can look at the data coming from the sensor. Now that we've got the sensor going, the next thing we're going to do is we'll run a wee program that will basically display the values for us. So from the command page, just click on the program page link on the left hand side, and have ended up in slot number 8, and this is just the default program. So all you do is copy the text of the program, which will be available in the description, and just select all the text in the program and paste the program into the program page like this. So this is the code that we're going to run. Then you just click on the rocket and the program will start running. So this is the title, which we see over here. And now it's basically just displaying values of temperature and humidity. So if I touch the sensor, the values will change. And if I blow on it, the humidity goes up, and so you can see the values changing. The program itself is very simple. The first thing it does is just clear the screen. The second thing it does is display a message. And then after that, it runs the F2C command, just like we did before, so that the JackBord will go off and find the sensors. And then lastly, in the program setup part, we just wait 2 seconds to let the sensors be detected. So this is the program start task. Then we come to the loop, and that's where we spend our time. And the first thing we do is we just print the count and then the values of temperature and humidity. And notice there are channel 37 and 38, which is what we had before. Next, we increment the value of the counter variable by 1. And then down here, we just check the counter to see if it's greater than or equal to 50. And if it is, then we're going to exit the program. And finally, we have a wee 1 second delay. And you can see that playing out here because it's got to reading 49 and it's quit. Now we're going to run the second program. So I'm in the same program slot as before, so I'm just going to select all of the existing code and delete it. And I've got the program in the clipboard, so I'm just going to paste it in. And this is program number 2. So we're going to click and save it. Click and run it. And notice that we're on the show page. So what this is doing is it's using 2 gauges to display values from the sensors. So if I touch the sensor, see the values change? And then if I change the humidity bit. So this program, instead of displaying text list, although it does, if you go back to the print tab, you can see it's actually displaying the text. It also displays 2 gauges. So just quickly looking at the code, it's pretty much the same as before. So this is basically all the same. Clear the screen, display the message, F2C to find the sensor, then wait 2 seconds. And the new bit we have is this command here, which is PB, which means put button. And that's how we got the exit button over here. Then going to the program loop, again, as before, we're just printing the values, so channel 37 and 38. But now we have these 2 new commands, which are the PG or put gauge commands. And all that's doing is at 10 space 40, so 10 along, 40 down, is creating a gauge and displaying the temperature. And you can see the temperature name there, and you can see the corresponding name on the gauge over here. And then to the next line, we have the relative humidity version. And again, you've got RH% here, and then the corresponding label over here. Now, unlike the previous one, this program doesn't stop after it's run 50 times. And so there's no any statement there. We increment the count, we wait 1 second, and then we repeat all of this over and over, which is why when you touch the sensor, the values change. So once again, to get the code for these programs, just look in the description of the video. There'll be a link to the code, and you literally copy and paste it into the program page. For more information, visit www.jackbord.works.